over to Viva for your drosha.
Thank you, Marion. Thanks. Well, the three sections I've chosen to read today, the three sections are absolutely key to the existence of mankind and to our destiny and our path as the Jewish people. The first section I read was when we heard very, very clearly that God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Now, this was in an era where, in ancient times, where there was no equality. If you and I are created in the image of Hashem, then we're equal. And Judaism is the beginning of understanding that equality, democracy, and Western values. Up until this point in the ancient world, there was no equality amongst people. Even the gods fought each other, and it was a mad battle of who would be the most powerful. All of a sudden, in this thinking, even much later, even Plato believed that it was a myth that people could be equal. They believed that people were born to be great, to be leaders, to be pharaohs. In fact, only the pharaohs and leaders, the words made in the image of God, had appeared in other religions, but they only referred to the pharaoh or the leader or the elite. So we revolutionized the world in many ways, and this Torah and this Breshit is the beginning of Western values and democracy. Now, I think that's amazing, but is it evident in our South Africa or in the world today that all people are equal? Is it evident that's how our leaders think? As the Rambam explains, why does it take so long? Because we all know in our heart of hearts that it's right and good for people to be equal. We know poverty exists, but we know we can help correct it, as indeed Temple Israel in a small way on a Thursday is attempting to do, and as we've always done. And there are thousands of people trying to correct it, but the world is still absolutely imperfect. And there are so many countries and so many places where dictatorship rules, where political themes are to grab and not to share equally. And why has it taken so long? And why, even in our world, is there so much hatred of the other, inequality? Well, listen to what the Rambam says. The Rambam explains in the Guide for the Perplexed that it takes people a long time to change. Judaism teaches us that we are born instinctively with goodness, with innocence, with knowledge of what we should and shouldn't do. And yet, we very rarely listen to the feeling inside us. We let that instinct go to say something in anger or to say something hurtful, when we really could have thought and said it in a different way or acted in a different way. Let's see what the famous Rambam says. He says it takes a long time for people to change. It takes a long time for the world to change according and acting to the laws of Torah. These are the basic laws. Yes, they were there before in the 10 Commandments, in the Noahide laws and others, but it takes a long time to change. For example, when we look at the fact that everything has to rest on Shabbat, in that ancient world, it was a way of Torah telling you, listen, on Shabbat, it's not only your rest day, it's the rest day of your animals, it's the rest day of your servants, it's the rest day of the world. It was the beginning, the very small beginning of the introduction of justice and equality. It doesn't happen overnight. The Torah understands that. And the Rambam makes it clear that the Torah is just the beginning, and it's going to take time for humanity to reach that stage where they will choose to think and act correctly, so that they and everyone else around us and the earth and the animals will survive in a good way. So people understood our Torah, and when the Christians took it up and it was the founding of America, they understood that slavery was bad. Remember that we abolished slavery even in ancient times every 7 years. Of course, there have to be employees and employers, but then it was slavery. And it wasn't an employee who could say, I don't like the work and leave. It was sheer slavery, but we introduced just the idea that it wasn't right. And even in America, although slavery was abolished, and remember, the entire American ideology is based on the Old Testament, because the founding fathers were very, very evangelic Christians, and they placed tremendous emphasis on the Old Testament. And as you know, in slavery, even though it was abolished in 1860, it really never left until much later without a civil war, and it still exists today. And you and I know that slavery is going on today. That because the Torah tells us that goodness, that humanity, that democracy is a work in progress. And you and I are part of that progress. And it still goes on today. And just to conclude this first section, the most repeated word here 7 times when God created the world is tov. That doesn't mean, it was good. It's a moral word. It means that Torah is telling us something really exceptional and radical for its time and still today, that basically the world can and should be and will be based on goodness, that there is goodness in every human being. And we've got to emphasize that goodness. And of course, we have to fight, resist, and at times kill that which is evil. But here is an ideology, a theology, just a way of thinking. For the first time in the world, instead of talking about power and who's going to control and the gods and etc., and basically the Greek thought that you can't change anything. Here it's not about power and it's not about dominance. It's about good and evil. And for the first time, mankind understands that we've got a choice. God had a choice. God is all powerful. He's created everything. And he had a choice. We know in Abraham's argument with God to save the world, if you remember, he even challenged God. And as we are created in God's image, we have a choice as well between good and evil over our words and our actions. So here is a Torah who introduces to the entire world, which the Western world follow today, and we're still trying to make it happen, a God that cares about justice, compassion, faithfulness, and loving kindness, and believes in the dignity of the individual and the sanctity of life. This was completely against every ancient thought at that time. And it was a way of controlling and thinking. And also, what is totally amazing is that this emphasis that everyone is equal, irrespective of something you and I take for granted today, but the world is still getting there. The other thing I want to emphasize here, which is important, is that in all other religions, even today, or let me say in most of them, because I'm not an expert in this, and in theologies and ideologies, there is one person or 10 people at the top who are in control of everything. They are They are the priests, so to speak, the leaders. In our Torah, God tells us very clearly, especially after the destruction of the second temple. Remember, in every bad thing that happens is a seed to, and it happened only because the Jews were arguing against themselves. They weren't united. As today, and as the world today, mankind is arguing extremes, and we're not united. But in every seed of adversity lies something which is going to improve the world if we look for it. So after the destruction of the first temple, guess what? We became a kingdom of priests. No rabbis are greater than you and I. It's finished. That era is finished. So today, and this is what Judaism also teaches the world with equality, that we are a kingdom of priests, that each human being has the ability to change the world around them. And that is our message. And so I just want to conclude now with two other very important issues. The one is the Garden of Eden. Why do you think God was so angry? Can anyone open their mics and tell me? Why was God so angry with Adam and Eve for going against his wishes? No idea. Michelle? Wow. Okay, it was because they denied responsibility. It wasn't because they went against his command. They actually blamed each other and the serpent. And if you blame other people and each other and the serpent and everyone else, how can God forgive us? How can there be redemption? Remember, there's always redemption, but first you've got to be created in God's image, be humble enough like Moses to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It was my fault. Please forgive me. Whether it's words that hurt someone or whether it's an action that stole someone from something, you can give it back and you can apologize. The sin was not going against the commandment. It was denying responsibility and blaming each other. And then that is the whole key of leadership and the point of this chapter. And just to conclude, may I point out that the positive mitzvahs that we are given in Judaism, 10 commandments, now worked up into 613. It's just an expansion. The positive mitzvahs are God's way of directing our thoughts and actions towards building a better world for humanity. So we can get back to the Garden of Eden, or, an era where the lion and the lamb will lay down together. There'll be no more hatred. The negative mitzvahs prevent us from destroying the world. So in the words of Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch, I'll conclude. In the Garden of Eden, the phrase to work and protect denote all man's moral conduct, his conscientious endeavor to do what is expected of him. All we are asked to do is consciously follow the positive mitzvahs that God has told us. No lashon hara, whether it's in a text or whether it's in words. No hating of the other. No treating the stranger as a stranger, but treating him as one of us. So it's quite amazing that all the positive ones and all the negative ones are for the good and future. And I've never actually seen the mitzvahs described in that way before. The positive ones directing our thoughts and actions to do the right things, and the negative mitzvahs preventing us from destroying the world around us. Violence, disease, terror reflect the negative actions, the mitzvahs we've been breaking that we haven't been listening to. So In the days of Noah, corruption of humans naturally led to the corruption of the entire planet because we've been given dominion. So on that thought, may I wish us all that we follow the knowledge and the wisdom of Torah, that we live by the positive mitzvahs, that we do our best to avoid the negative mitzvahs and help Hashem bring a better world tomorrow. Shabbat Shalom.